Today's guest is six-fight UFC veteran Richy Walsh. You might remember him, Sydney-based fighter. He's now the Director of Business and Coaching for Train Alta, which is an MMA program which basically focuses on taking people from not just like walking into an MMA gym the first time, but basically non-athletic people. You get an accountant that's a fan in the city and wants to learn. He's probably even too scared to even walk into an MMA gym. It takes you through like the bare basics of movement for mixed martial arts, and they have like 20-week programs that get you all the way up to fighting in a show. Evenly matched. It's a lot of fun. It's very similar to like your white collar boxing and whatnot. And if you ever knew Wimp to Warrior back in the day, very, very, very similar, except they've kind of made some adjustments and moving forward. John Kavanagh, Conor McGregor's coach, Daniel Cormier, Laura Sanko, who's a UFC commentator. So many guys and girls all around the world are participating in this as the MMA sport is booming, and Train Alta just make it that much easier to get involved in the sport we all love. We chat to Richy Walsh about like the program, how you get involved, what's involved in it. And also a little bit about his UFC career and like why he walked away, and he's got some advice for younger fighters. And he also picks who he thinks will be signed to the UFC next. So it's an excellent chat. I'm really looking forward to it, and you should too. So right now, ladies and gentlemen, Richy Walsh. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, the Director of Coaching and Business and six-fight UFC veteran, Richy Walsh. Mate, welcome.
Pleasure to be on the show.
Now, Train Alta, some people might have known as Wimp to Warrior back in the day. First of all, why the change, and just what's sort of the premise when someone at the pub asks you about it? What do you tell them?
I guess the premise was always participation in the sport and building that. I think Wimp to Warrior was a really good vehicle for people who had an interest in mixed martial arts, who are fans, or maybe not even fans, but wanted to challenge themselves, wanted a life-changing experience, or just wanted to do something that was out of the box. And that's really what Wimp to Warrior was started on. It was the genesis of it in 2013, and then that evolved into where we are now as Train Alta. And we're currently building something bigger than just the program, but really the kind of core thing, or the core theme that we've been stuck to, is that 20-week journey of transformation through the Warrior training program, all the way to stepping in the cage at the end. So I guess when people ask me, what am I doing now after you've been fighting it? I first was introduced to, when it was Wimp to Warrior originally, 2014, and that's when I met a fellow called Nick Langton, who's actually one of the founders of was Wimp to Warrior at the time, but now Train Alta, and I took a class that they were doing. I think it was maybe only the second series of the program. And obviously coming into it, I thought, you need to be training for, a substantial amount of time before you step in the cage, and all the other things that you naturally would think. But when I got the opportunity to coach and see the cohort of people, I was blown away by just how receptive they were to learning, and followed their journey through the 20 weeks. And I can say that everybody was ready to have a fair match against someone else in that program, and it was an awesome thing to be a part of. So that's where I first got introduced to it, and I only started working with the company about just under a year and a half ago now. So that's kind of my journey to working for the company. But yeah, it was first coaching while I was in the UFC, and then now working with the company.
And what's the biggest difference between taking regular people who have basically never done anything, maybe even sport, and then teaching people that are aspiring MMA fighters? Like, what's the difference?
Massive difference. I think the preconceived ideas of what it is or what MMA is, that none of those are kind of there for people that are really fresh, and they're very malleable, and you can kind of take them on that journey. And it's not only when it gets to kind of play-in sport or performance, I think like a lot of the people who are doing it are athletes. And to get to that top level, you have to be an athlete. So you probably have been athletic your whole life. Whereas, Alta was an opportunity to, branch out to everybody who had, who wanted the opportunity to have a fight, whether it be a challenge, originally for weight loss, for, they've got to a point where they need something in their life like that, or they just, like I said, they just wanted to step in the cage, always wanted to do it, but there was no pathway. So I guess the big difference is structuring a syllabus that can get somebody from limited experience or no experience training all the way to stepping in a cage safely within 20 weeks. So I guess I had to think long and hard about creating that syllabus and how we would deliver it to those, you know, doing the warrior training program. So that's probably been the biggest challenge. But the main difference is, I would say, is I previously worked at the UFC Performance Institute, and we had the advantage of everybody coming from an athletic pedigree or background, probably trained for years already. So you didn't have to teach the basics, and you didn't have to really unpack what you're trying to teach. And for me as a coach, coming back and coaching beginners is much more, what's the word to say? It's much more valuable as a coach, because you're seeing their eyes light up when you show them just how to throw a jab, how to throw a cross, how to do a hip escape, why you bridge and roll, and their eyes are, you know, big and illuminated. They're asking you all the right questions, and the excitement is there. And I think you miss that a little bit with the top end fighters, because it becomes something different. It becomes very competitive, and becomes about, you know, a career. So it's been very refreshing just to step back into that world and see the transformation that the program brings to people's lives.
Do you even have to sort of get them accustomed to even being hit?
We just get them in day one and just for sure. So I thought long and hard about what's the best way, and all the learning lessons along the way. When I started mixed martial arts, or I started kickboxing or boxing, we didn't have an easy on-ramp into training. So the biggest thing for me was about, how do we get these guys, you know, through the 20 weeks without dropping out, getting punched in the head. So let's take the lowest denominator of a person who hasn't trained in years, they've never done combat sports, they didn't play rugby or anything hard, you know, and let's be able to take them through from week 1 to 20, okay? And that's how we structured it. So I wouldn't bring in the sparring aspect, getting punched in the face, till you know, at least the midway point. I'd like to slowly build them up to the foundational and fundamental movements that make up striking, grappling, wrestling. Then we build up their fitness, and obviously, you know, the structure around that. Then we bring them into some isolated sort of drills around that. And then eventually I would stair-step them into that sparring, starting with jab sparring, and then jab and cross sparring, and some wrestling sparring. We'd bring that all together in around week 15 to 20, where they start to put that MMA sparring together. But of course, I think if you bring that in too early, you are just, you're essentially, a lot of people want to spar early, but I don't think you're helping the cohort, because you improve very quick when you start that tough sparring quickly. A lot of people drop off. The tough guys stay around, and girls, and they get good quick, but they flatline out because they get a lot of bad habits. So I just try to eliminate that through a real progressive program, right? So that's a longer conversation, but
No.
I guess the point is, getting used to getting punched in the face. I don't know if you ever get used to it. You certainly get used to opening your eyes and keeping your eyes open. That would be the biggest thing, as you know,
the flinch
before is, it's like you start flinching, closing your eyes, and of course the fear of getting punched is is greater than the actual feeling of getting punched, right? So I think getting people through that, and that self-belief that they can spar, and then they start to develop that like I said, that self-belief that they can do it.
And do you have numbers on, and I don't think everyone expects 100% of people to stick around, because it is, you know, at the end of the day, it is fighting. It doesn't matter how nice you make it, but like, is there an aspect of, have you seen numbers dropped off, and is there things that you guys have done to sort of correct it?
Yeah, 100%. I think there is a high percentage of people who start and finish, albeit, you know, there's always going to be some people that, for whatever reasons, be it personal or, you know, move away from work, or there's an injury, it does happen. I think the best way to mitigate that was firstly the implementation of a structured syllabus where we can build them up slowly. So we're kind of getting that robustness for to use the word. So building that robustness in their physicality and their fitness, that base layer, and then we develop that into more isolated or constraints-based kind of learning, and then we'll build it into that sparring and that higher risk stuff when they're ready for it, when they're more durable. So for me, there's always going to be some people that will just drop out, because that's the nature of any sport, right? You start, commitments happen, an injury may happen, but we've seen from over the years, as we've tweaked it, or as I've seen it tweaked, and especially when I've started working here, that there's a vast majority of people who start who continue all the way through the journey.
And do you reckon it's because of the way you implement, like no one gets really scared off like you would in a normal MMA gym if you weren't up to that level?
Yeah, absolutely. I think more than anything, Alta is like a vehicle for people to to come from, fandom into participation and that on-ramp of not stepping into a gym that's, because some of our programs are at the biggest MMA gyms in the world,
Yeah.
right? Whether it be city kickboxing like you're wearing on your shirt. So as a layman or as someone just to walk off the street in Auckland and go, take a peek in the gym and see Israel
Dan Hooker and
Dan Hooker, those guys, you might go, okay, that's a step too far for me to go. But insert Alta, which is a platform for you to, total beginners to limited experience to step on in a morning session with professional fighters guiding you through 20 weeks, is the ultimate, I think, soft experience or soft on-ramp into it. And I think that's where we've really hit the mark with a lot of gyms is becoming that median and that transitionary into the sport for people who are just on the outside interested, but maybe think they can't do it on too late in the piece or whatever it is. So it works very well. Is
there anyone that partakes in it and you go, no, you're almost too good too quick, so we're going to kick you out, or like go to the MMA?
No, not particularly, because as like any class, you get varying abilities or skill sets. So you just need to obviously partner them up with people that are similar weight and skill set. And then when it comes to the matching element of it after the 20 weeks, it's always got to be a fair and equitable match. And I think when you eyeball people for 20 weeks as a coach, you have a very good understanding, especially when they're fighting internally, of who can pair up with who, as opposed to other amateur fights when someone says, oh, they've had 5 fights, you don't really know what they're like because you don't watch them day in, day out. So I think one of my main concerns when I first started was the matchups and the fairness and are they good enough? But then afterwards I realized when you're eyeballing someone for 20 weeks or the group, and then you have this relationship with other gyms, it's actually easier to match them up fairly.
And that's what it is. I was going to say, is the matching up the trickiest part, or the part you take the most serious? Because of course you don't want them to do this 20 weeks and then get absolutely smashed and then never come back.
Yeah, no, definitely take it serious. And just going off your last question before, does anyone get too good too quick? I would say for that reason, no. We'll always find someone who's a fair matchup. You have had people previously who've started their MMA, or professional MMA fighters now, who've started their journey through Alta, or amateurs especially. So it's definitely a pathway for some people. And what your next question that you just asked there was?
It was just about the sort of, in terms of, like coaches, when they throw their fighters into a fight show, you're obviously very concerned about the matchup. You probably have a little bit more control over each matchup.
100%.
Do you get really critical on when you maybe do accidentally mismatch it here and there?
Well, I don't personally match every fight because we partner with, credible gyms, for example, City Kickboxing, SBG, John Kavanagh in Ireland. We have gyms in Australia, that are kind of leading the charge.
Who are you working with just quickly, who are you working with in Australia?
Oh, we've worked with gyms in Brisbane, Melbourne, whether it be Daniel Kelly Resilience Training Centre, Absolute in Melbourne, whether in Sydney Warrior Training Academy, which is also a legacy, SBG here. So, and Ben Vickers in Scrappy MMA in Perth. Up to Brisbane, we've worked with Jason at the Gamebred Academy. So a lot of gyms that have fight teams already. And I'd say those coaches we trust with matchmaking. And of course, they often come back to us, and we will, sometimes help them out with matchmaking. If we can't get a match on a card, we have other promotions here that have had, ex-competitors fight. It's always willing someone to step in and match up a fair match. So that's how we've done it in the past. I'm obviously not directly involved in matchmaking. We leave that to the coaches because they're the people that are going to be watching them week in, week out. And
if anyone wanted to get involved in this, they've heard it and it interests them, where would be the best place to start?
I would check out the site, trainalta.com, search your local area and see what programs we're running in your area. We're running in the US, North America, obviously in we talked about New Zealand, Australia, Oceania, and then Ireland and the UK. So we have programs kind of running everywhere. Usually some gyms run 2 programs a year. So right now we're about to start in City Kickboxing. We just did start in City Kickboxing with just over 100 people on the mats. So 2 sessions, 2 morning sessions, split into 2. I think Eugene, I spoke to Eugene last week. He told me there's 45 fights from Train Alta in the finale 2 weeks ago. So absolute, huge participation in New Zealand and a massive appetite for it.
And now on a personal level, going from your professional fight career to now, you're involved in the sport, but at this level, did you see yourself being involved after you retired, and are you happy with where it's going?
Yeah, I mean, I always thought I'd be involved with mixed martial arts or martial arts in general, whether it would be, I have children now, whether it be taking my kids to jujitsu or continuing to coach myself. So part of my journey after being a professional athlete was being involved with coaching um, some of the fighters from my own gym in Sydney. And then from there, that gave me the opportunity, or at least the insight into what was involved in coaching. And then from there, I moved to China and was coaching at the Performance Institute, and had a great opportunity to learn under someone, Dean Amasinger, who'd worked with Michael Bisping and the Smashers, the first Ultimate Fighter. He was a coach here. He coached in rugby. He coached in other various professional sports, where he'd taken that knowledge and condensed it into a really good program, really good programming and planning, which I hadn't seen done in MMA or combat sports at all, just that level of professionalism. So I got to work with him in China for 4 years and be his right-hand man. I think over a couple of years, we did 127 corners together. We put a lot of people into the UFC from Asia. So that experience in itself was like condensing all his learning and just the amount of fights and corners that we did. It was like just by watching and being part of it, I got the opportunity, just really blessed actually, just to learn a lot in a condensed period of time. And then from there, my transition back from Asia to Sydney, the opportunity to work with Train Alta came up. So it's kind of gone from that professional cornering guys, bringing them to the UFC and the Contender Series, to then back to Australia, to not coaching professionals, working on syllabus here for for the beginners, and really experiencing both sides of the spectrum.
And comparing your fight career to your coaching career, which, I mean, in hindsight, which have you enjoyed more?
That's a good question. I think that's dependent on, if you ask me when I was fighting or now, right? But hindsight's great. I mean, fighting was exciting, and there was a period of time when all I wanted to do was be in the UFC. I don't think I even wanted to be the champion. I just wanted to have the opportunity to. I saw it when I was young, and I was like, I want to do that. I really want to get in the UFC, and that was just my goal for several years till I did it. And then obviously, you said at the start, I had 6 fights, some ups and downs, probably due to just lack of experience, I'd say, in the cage. By the time I fought in the UFC or the Ultimate Fight, I think I'd had 8 fights or 7
Yeah.
or 8 fights. So it was just, I think I was trying to catch my feet up, to how fast I was running in terms of my technical knowledge. Had I think, slowed down a little bit and taken more domestic fights, I think I would have been better. Would I got the opportunity to fight in the UFC? I don't know. So I think I just went with, the best opportunity at the time. So yeah, I mean, I think it was more just when you're ready to not be fighting anymore and then you want to be coaching, it transitions seamlessly. So I couldn't say, which one I enjoyed more, because at the time, I think fighting, you had the adrenaline, you had the ups and the downs, you had the hard sessions, the camaraderie, the gym, all of that kind of banter that goes along with it. And then coaching, you get a lot of satisfaction out of watching your athletes and sharing that journey with them. But they're two very polarizing things, because you can't be a good athlete when you're trying to be the best of anything else. You can only be the best at doing the sport. And then as a coach, you struggle to stay in shape and keep up with the guys because you're focusing your time on watching the sport, trying to be a better student of the sport and a better coach and a better technical understanding, but you're not in the most athletic period of your life. And they just don't coincide. I mean,
Yeah, I was going to say, because from my math, I think you retired a month before your 28th birthday, unless I'm mistaken. Why did you retire so early? That's many people's peak.
Yeah, I'd say that peak's probably even like later, right? Kind of 28 to 30.
Yeah.
Now where I'm now, mid 30s. I think I'd lost kind of sight of what I was doing. Obviously had some losses, which had me thinking about it. Then I had some kind of turmoil within, coaching staff, and then my enjoyment of the sport, I think, suffered from that. Also, you just, as you've been around it for so long, since you're a teenager to you're kind of getting to late 20s, you start to go, is this it for me? I'm having ups and downs and success, and life goes on afterwards, and I want to do a lot of other things. So that was in the back of my mind. Added to the fact, getting punched in the face a lot, you start to think, if health reasons, I don't want to be doing this for a long time. Am I going to make a lot of money out of this in a big career? So all those things kind of chirping away just resulted in, I think, getting in that last fight in the cage where I was in there, but I wasn't really there fighting to win. I was just going through the motions. And then after that, I went, I already fought before, and I had a great fight. I never bludged on fight camps and never took it easy. But when I got in the cage, I just couldn't switch on. When I was less experienced and less technically qualified per se, I'd be in the cage. I'd just be trying to win at all costs, and that's you got that kind of dog in you, right? And that was gone. So it's just, at that period, I went, okay, it's time to move on. I didn't know exactly what to move on to, but I knew it was time to move on, or at least take a break. And that was tough. That's probably the toughest time in my life in terms of ups and downs. That would be the toughest point coming out of a professional career in anything, where you're at your kind of peak performance, to losing your identity of training and being around the gym and being around that that ecosystem daily. So then coaching was another kind of platform to test myself. So, but it took me a good probably year and a half to kind of bounce back from that.
And if you had to give any advice to any younger fighter, perhaps maybe 2, 3-0 as a professional, what would it be, both professionally and personally?
Professionally, it would be, don't be in a rush. Make sure you can put the best coaching staff around you. And that's not the best people on paper. That would be the people who have your back and that want to and have the ability to take you to where you need to be, but are willing to put the time in for you. So in terms of coaching and who you surround yourself, you should be aiming for the stars. And that's not to say you just cut your coach you have now and go to someone else. It's like, if that guy can take you to all the way to the UFC, you stay with that guy if he's got your back. In terms of training, I would say that most people overtrain and try to do too much. Focus on, in off camp, focus on your weaknesses, and in camp, focus on your strengths. Too many people in off camp, when they don't have a fight coming up, they're just doing things they like. Focus on your weaknesses in off camp. Technically, where you're weak. Strength and essency, where you're weak. And when it comes to fight camp, you don't have time to do that. So that would be my big takeaways. Would be surround yourself with good people, good coaches, good mentors. Throw away anything else. And when it comes to training, you have to do the things that you don't like. Don't just do the things you like.
And I ask everyone this, but I mean, I think it's kind of cool too, because you're still heavily invested in the sport, especially coaching. You're almost getting to the prime of that and finally getting recognized the way you should be. And professionally, athletically, you can look back on it. But after it's all said and done, how do you hope and how do you think Richy Walsh was remembered?
I'm only 34. It sounds like
that's what I mean. It feels weird because you're still around, like, you know what I mean? You're still pumping, but like the career is over in terms of the personal accolades. And now you're into this new world of being a young, because 34 is very young to be a very prestigious head coach, which you're heading in the road to being. So I find that to be an interesting sort of situation.
I would say for me right now, my focus is obviously in the business with Train Alta and where we're heading in that direction. On a personal level, it's with my children, because I have 2 children under 3. So it's not necessarily about what I want to do right now in terms of personal goals. My goal is just to try to be a good father, and then also try to be a better husband, although those 2 things are hard in unison with career. So that's my focus for now. But moving forward, I still want to get back into coaching, of course. But what people don't understand is it's like I'm either all the way in or all the way out, in terms of I can't be coaching a professional athlete who wants to give it their all, because I know what that's like. If I can't do that because I've got to look after my kids. I can't do that because I've got to do work. So I want to get back into coaching when the time's right, because coaching athletes requires a lot of your time, and it's selfless, right? So I definitely want to get back into coaching. My goal would be to take someone to the UFC belt, right, when the time's right. Second to that, I think would be just get back in shape myself and start enjoying training for what it is. That's probably my goal in this. But how people would remember me, I don't know. Hopefully as I don't know. That's a good question.
And finally, is there anyone not currently signed to the UFC in all of Australia that you think should be the next one up?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've been following Van Heerden. I think he's got the skills to be signed. Um, as far as anybody else, I haven't seen anyone. You're probably closer to the scene than I am, but Van Heerden, I'd say, is probably the one guy that has the potential. He's got the raw kind of toughness. I think he'd go well in the UFC in that setting just because of his mental fortitude and toughness.
Awesome. Well, Director of Coaching and Business Development of Train Alta, Richy Walsh, it's an absolute honor to have you on. Thank you for taking the time, and yeah, hopefully we can chat again soon.
I appreciate it, man. Anytime. Thank you so much.